Mic on.
December 4th, meeting of Central Oklahoma Transportation and Parking Authority to order. And the first order of business we have is to. Mic on? There we go. We'll try that again. Officially calling the December 4th meeting of the Central Oklahoma Transportation and Parking Authority to order. The first order of business that we have is to take a request for a motion for a chair pro tem. We have both our chairperson and our vice chairperson absent today, so we'll need a chair pro tem. And if I could get a motion to nominate a chair pro tem, we'll take those at that time.
I would like to nominate Laura Johnson to serve as pro tem.
We have a motion and a second.
Can you use your, yeah. I'm already being bossy.
Yep, all in favor? We're gonna, okay. It looks like the votes are in, and I will turn the meeting over to Chairperson Johnson.
Thank you, Jason. I'd just like to recognize that Chairman Kaufman and Vice Chair Sempner are not here today for health concerns, and we recognize and appreciate their service to the board, even though they can't be here today. Our next item is citizens to be heard. Seeing no citizens to be heard, we'll move on to the approval of the minutes. The minutes of the November 4th, 2020 COPPA Finance Committee special meeting are in your packet. Do I have a motion?
Move to approve. Second.
That item passes. The next item is minutes of the November 6th, 2020 COPPA board meeting, also in your packet. Do I have a motion?
Motion to approve.
Councilman Cooper moves. Trustee Ruiz seconds. And that motion passes. The next item is our consent docket. Are there any items that anyone would like to consider individually? Hearing none, I'll accept a motion on the consent docket. It's been moved and seconded. Please cast your vote. And that item has passed. Next, we have items for individual consideration. The first is a change order number 9 for project number MB 1413 Convention Center Parking Garage, 15 Southwest 4th Street, Oklahoma City, for additional signage and other corner guards. Bollard covers, sump pump cover, and modifications to handrails, guardrails, and elevator cab flooring, an increase of $73,600. Jason, do you have any comments on this?
Yeah, a few comments, Chairperson. A few comments for the trust, Chairperson Johnson. So this is our 9th change order for the garage. As mentioned in the title of the item, the amount is a $73,600 increase. And also listed in the title, as you read, was most of the modifications that are associated with this change order. But if you want more detail on what makes up that $73,600 increase, that's included in the attachment from TAP Architecture. There's actually 11 items that are associated with this increase. Just to kind of look at the project overall, again, this being our 9th change order, we've actually seen a total increase from the original contract of $487,809 in change orders. So although we have 9 change orders in total, if you look at the project in its entirety, that's about a 2.1% increase from the original contract amount, which I think is pretty good in this case. We do have one amendment that's been associated with this project. If you roll the amendment in, the total increase from the original contract amount is $542,000. Again, a respectable 2.3% increase overall in the project. And I'll have a few comments for you at the conclusion of the meeting when we get into the staff reports, the parking report specifically. But I will, at this time, go ahead and mention that we did complete substantial completion on the garage on November 25th. So for all intents and purposes, the project is wrapping up. Glad to answer any questions.
Are there any questions for Jason regarding this item? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion. It being moved and seconded, and the votes are cast, this item passes. Item B, without reading the whole item, I'll say that this is a supplemental and modification agreement, number 1, with the State of Oklahoma Department of Transportation for Federal Highway Surface Transportation Block Grant funds for the purchase of 2 40-foot buses. Jason?
Yes, thank you, Chairperson. So yeah, with this item here, we're continuing to work with ODOT in securing the proper documentation to be awarded and be able to spend some STBG UZA grant funds for the purchase of 2 transit buses. And again, just as a reminder to the trust, this is the first time we've been able to successfully be awarded those STBG funds for transit buses. So it's a new funding source for us for bus replacement. It's also the first time that ODOT has actually worked with a transit agency to formulate such an agreement. So with that, we're both working together and figuring out the requirements as we go. And that's part of the reason why we're presenting a supplemental and modified agreement to the trust. In August, COTPA, the COTPA Trust actually approved an agreement with ODOT for these funds. And then since that time, ODOT basically approached us and said, hey, we really need a supplemental. We feel like there's some additional documentation that we need to include that we should have had in the first one. And so that's really what the purpose of this is. And to be specific, if you look at page 1 of the agreement, there's a list under the second whereas paragraph of like 11 different documents that they wanted us to provide to them. All of them which we have, all of them which we keep in good standing as evidenced by our triennial reviews that the FTA does on every 3 years. So you can see that list there. It's basically just providing them, our procurement policy, our TAM plan, and I won't read the entire list there, but things like our Title VI, our EEO, all those things that keep us in good standing with the FTA. So with approval of this item, we'll be able to hopefully finalize this agreement, and you'll be the first to know when the buses arrive.
Okay, are there any questions for Jason on this item? Hearing none, we'll have a motion and a second, and all in favor, cast your votes. You're an aye. Are you not? Oh. Okay. All right, that item has passed. The next item is one of the documents that we'll need for our submission here, I see,
right.
our PSAP plan.
Yep.
Resolution approving the Public Transportation Agency Safety Plan, version 1, December 2020, attached in your document for bus operations and authorized implementation of the safety management system. Jason?
Yes, thank you, Chairperson Johnson. We have before you basically a continuation of our enhanced safety efforts at Embark and really the transit industry as a whole. I know we've talked in the past through committee meetings and also trust meetings about the new FTA requirements, really necessitating that public transit agencies develop a public transit agency safety plan and that they implement a safety management system. And we are well on our way. We are in compliance with the FTA's regulations and state safety oversight's regulations on the rail side. So for our Oklahoma City streetcar operation, we have a PTASP and ODOT approval already in place. And then as I mentioned, this is really just a continuation. It's taking those best practices, that safety plan we have on the rail side, and applying it to the bus side of our operations. And by doing so, that will not only enhance the safety of our system, but keep us in compliance with the FTA regulations. The safety plan, I will mention, was presented to the Transportation Committee yesterday, actually. Just like the rail agency safety plan was presented months earlier, and the committee recommended approval of the safety plan to the trust. Glad to answer any questions.
Are there any questions for Jason? Hearing none, we'll have a motion. And now voting. And that item has passed. Congratulations, Jason, that's quite a milestone. The next item on our agenda is ratification of claims and payroll for the period of November 3rd through November 24th. Those are in your packet. I'll take a motion. And voting. And that item has passed. The next item is to receive our COTPA schedules of revenues and expenditures, budget to actuals for the month ended October 31st, 2020. Jason?
Yeah, a few comments on the financials for the trust this morning. If I could direct your attention to page 2, this is the budget to actual for our transportation operations through October 31st of 2020. So essentially, this is through the first month of that second quarter of our fiscal year. And looking at the transportation operations, I wanted to just remind the trustees that in November, you approved a budget amendment. And of course, that budget amendment is not reflected in this financial because this is really October's budget to actual. So in case you were looking for some different numbers or looking for the amount that was approved by the trust in November, you'll see that on the budget to actual next month. But with that said, wanted to really direct your attention to the bottom line, and that is the operating loss or income. And you can see that through October 31st, our expenses have exceeded our revenues by about $1.5 million. And again, that's part of the reason why we presented a budget amendment to the trust, was to be able to program some of that additional CARES funding to offset some of the revenue that we had programmed to come in through the fare box that we're just not seeing because of our ridership levels and the continuing pandemic. So in addition to the additional CARES funding that that the trust has approved as part of the budget, I did want to mention the state government subsidy. We have received that full annual subsidy. We received it in November. So as you'll recall, that's about $1 million to the trust there. So if you think about an additional $1 million in revenue coming from the state that's not reflected in this report, and then the action that the trust took in November to program some additional CARES funding to offset some of our expenses, we should be in good shape for the end of the year. But I just wanted to kind of recap that because everything we did last month isn't really reflected right here. On I guess the next page I would direct your attention to, and I won't go through every page of the financials, but I also want to mention on page 4, this is our budget to actual for the parking operations. And, I mentioned this is, this budget to actual is, through basically looking at the first month of that second quarter of the fiscal year. And that's critical for our parking budget to actual, because as we were putting the budget together, back in the April, May timeframe, we had anticipated, a slow recovery from the pandemic, and we had actually projected our revenues to start increasing a bit in that second quarter of the fiscal year and then gaining some momentum as we went further through the fiscal year, specifically with regards to event revenue. Well, as we all know, we're not seeing, any increase, any events. And so I'm just letting you know that we as staff, we are revising our revenue projections, and we'll have some of that information to share with the trust. But, directing your attention to our budgeted event revenue, we've got $1.2 million budgeted here for the fiscal year, and there's a good chance, we'll actually receive a very minimal amount. So all that background to say, when you look at this financial and you see, actually an operating income here through 4 months of the fiscal year of $230,000, we will see a very significant swing on that in the months ahead as we look at our budget to actual. But again, just reassuring the trust that we as staff are looking at it. We will be working with the finance department to revise that revenue projection as well. And as we always do, keep the trust fully informed. But with that said, through 4 months of the fiscal year, parking operation is in really pretty good shape. We're going to have to be pretty flexible and be able to look at some different projections and manage some expenses a little bit differently through the second half of the year in particular. I think the last page I would direct your attention to is page 7. This is the streetcar operations. And, really just a couple of quick comments here. Looking at the revenues, you can see we're at about 96% of our overall revenues. But our fare box revenue, again, not surprising, it is continuing to underperform. We're actually about $35,000 less than what we had anticipated in collecting, so probably not going to hit that revenue projection by the end of the year. On our expenditures, though, I will direct your attention to the third line down, the streetcar operations. This is one where in previous months, we've indicated we've had, a couple of different invoices to Herzog that have been outstanding as we've been reviewing the expenses and really, I'd say, auditing them, if you will, before we sign off. I mean, it takes a lot of time to get through those invoices sometimes. We have basically we basically got caught up on those invoices through October.
So Jason, the $940,000 there to
Rick,
Herzog.
can you turn on your microphone? Is your microphone on?
I pushed.
Go ahead.
Hello? Hello?
Okay, that's good.
Again? On the 940, does that represent like through what, September?
Yeah,
costs?
that
So you don't
represents-
have the $300 and some thousand you probably will pay them, so
Yeah,
you
so-
basically are breaking even for October, because then that, if you did take out, if you had the October payment, then you may not have the 378,
Right.
right? Because you haven't got the bill for their services in October.
Right.
Okay.
We've actually paid through October, but to your point, only through September is reflected here, which, yes, would then consume really any of that
Okay.
surplus income you see.
All right, thank you.
Yep. And with that, I'm glad to answer any other questions on the financials.
Are there any questions for Jason on the financials? Hearing none. We have a motion and a second. And that item is passed. Our last item today, on the agenda here is to receive the program reports. Jason, I'm not going to call out each one of these individual, but if you have some statements to make,
Yeah.
I'd appreciate that.
Yeah, I have just a few items to share with the trustees related to the program reports, and I regret staff is not here to do their thorough presentation that you're used to receiving, but we did want to social distance as best as possible today. So I'll share a few comments with you. Starting with the community engagement and customer relations report, I did want to let the trustees know that, as part of our community engagement efforts, particularly with the bus rapid transit, much like we did with the streetcar, meaning, the city as a whole with that project, working with the property owners and the business owners along the route. We've met with Homeland, we've met with New View, Elemental Coffee, Penn Square, Post Oak. There's probably some others that I've left off the list, but the point is we're out there. I say we, it's primarily Kristen Torkelson, our community engagement liaison. But we're out there talking to the business owners, letting them know what's coming and educating them about the project. And again, kind of just taking that successful model that we use with streetcar, we're going to do the same with BRT. So it'll be frequent, visits. It won't be just we're going to see them once and tell them about the project. We'll keep them advised throughout. The other thing I wanted to mention is that the BRT Advisory Committee, the first meeting we have scheduled will be scheduled in January. And appreciate Trustee Cooper and Trustee Sepner both offering to serve on that advisory committee. And really where we're at with the project, being at essentially 30% design. We've received the preliminary design report, which will be presented to the trust in January. We as staff feel like that's an optimal time to kick off this advisory committee because that's when we'll, now that we're past 30% design, we'll be able to really start making some decisions on what, some of the final design elements look like with regards to the platform, with the branding. And so just, in my mind, a really good time to start that stakeholder engagement. And then the last thing I wanted to mention on community engagement is, we typically do a health fair at the Transit Center in the fall. And of course, we were not able to do that this year. But nonetheless, staff working with our partners that help put on that health fair have found a way to try to provide for flu shots. So one of the big things we do at the health fair is we provide free flu shots. Roughly about 150 are given when we have that health fair. So what we've done is we've actually worked with 3 different clinics along our bus routes. And we will be providing a limited number of basically vouchers, if you will, transporting our customers, our community members to those clinics to be able to get flu shots rather than, setting up at the transit center and having people congregate. So again, I just really appreciate our staff and our partners on that, working to figure out some ways to still be able to deliver that service just a little bit differently than we normally do. A couple of comments on the parking report. As I'd mentioned, the garage was substantially completed on 11/25. On December 2nd, we began moving in some supplies and equipment to the office area where our contracted parking operator is going to operate from. We expect our permanent certificate of occupancy around 12/20. And then the opening of the garage is scheduled right now for January the 5th. And any type of grand opening or ribbon cutting will be scheduled in advance of the Omni or the Convention Center opening, really to just keep our commitment to having the garage open before or at the time that both those facilities come online. So the last piece I have on the parking is just to let you know that about 1/8 of the artwork is complete. If you haven't had an opportunity to go by the garage, especially on the E.K. Gaylord side, it's really, really neat. I think the art is just gonna, I don't know how you're gonna be able to drive by and not look at that garage with the artwork on the side of it. But I do have some nice pictures as well. If anybody would like some pictures, I'm happy to send that to you. The artwork is, although it's going up pretty quick, it's taking a little bit longer than what we had initially projected. So it may be as late as April before the artwork is finished in its entirety, but it is going up rather quickly. So that would wrap up my comments on the parking report. Just a couple.
Jason, I might just mention on the parking report, So this convention center grand opening was originally scheduled for December the 11th, but that has been canceled. Even though we were trying to plan a socially distanced event, there just didn't seem to be good rationale for bringing people together for a celebration at that time. I think it'll be rescheduled in approximately mid-March, of course, depending on how things are going, and so we'll see. So it's possible that the garage could open, I assume, even without some sort of formal ribbon cutting or grand opening. I just didn't want the trustees to be disappointed if there wasn't an event and a picture-taking opportunity and all of that. But given the pandemic, I think it's unwise to bring us together, even outdoors, for at least until spring. We'll see what happens in the spring. So.
Yep, thank you for that. Okay, so wrapping up comments on the program reports. Just wanted to direct your attention to the streetcar report. As you can see, in terms of ridership goes, we're averaging a little over 300 on a weekday. Fridays, we're averaging about 567 trips. And I did want to point out that we've got a typo in your report there on page 3. Friday ridership, although the graph below it is correct, the bullet point says average Friday ridership is 5,567. It has one extra 5 in it, so that is 567.
A giant type.
Yeah, we had some great Fridays. But, and then anyway, on our Saturday ridership, we're looking at about 700. But I wanted to really, direct your attention to Friday and actually, I guess it was last Friday and Saturday, November the 27th and 28th. We had 2 really strong days there at 871 trips and 914 trips. And I know that Jesse and I were both out, actually, I believe it was on Saturday evening, and noticed, just a little bit of an uptick in activity downtown with the, lights on Broadway and some of the stuff downtown OKC's doing, and that certainly contributes to ridership on the streetcar. One other thing, just as an announcement, that with the Trust's approval, we're offering the free streetcar service on Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays as part of the Downtown December celebration, and that's November 20th through January 3rd. Finally, finishing with our transit system report, our weekday ridership, as you can see, is right at around 5,700, so that's about 60% of our normal ridership. But what's interesting is if you look at our mobility management and really our Embark Plus for that matter, our mobility management, we're doing about 220 trips a day, which is closer to like 75% of our normal ridership. And then Embark Plus, our paratransit service, at 111 trips per day is about 65% of our normal service levels. So for those, those services that, like our paratransit or our mobility management, where, a lot of customers that use those services really don't have another option, the ridership is certainly holding stronger than, say, the fixed route. So I think it just demonstrates the need for those services. And then our on-time performance was 72%, and this is the 4th consecutive month we've exceeded 70% on our on-time performance, with our goal, our target, our Leading for Results performance target being 75. So thank you for letting me make so many comments on the program reports. But
Are there any questions for Jason on the program reports? Hearing none, I'll take a motion on receiving the program reports. And that item has passed. Yay. Our last item on the agenda is items from trustees. Trustee Ruiz, do you have any items today?
No.
Trustee Cooper? Trustee Bryant? Trustee Hill? I just want to commemorate this last meeting of 2020. 2020 has certainly been a year full of challenges, and I think our transit operation particularly, but our whole Embark operation has risen to the occasion in an extraordinary way. I'd like to commend all the operators and all of your staff in terms of keeping people on the road, keeping people moving to their essential appointments. I know there's had to be a lot of flexibility, a lot of cooperation, especially from our passengers and from our operators, so I appreciate that very much. I'd like to wish everyone a happy holidays, a Merry Christmas, and Happy New Year, and bring on 2021. And if there's nothing else, we are adjourned.